There is a word in Africa that sums up a whole art of living, Ubuntu. It means I am because we are. But what does it really mean? Imagine a big family where everyone helps each other, where no one is alone, where every smile, every gesture counts for the good of all. That is Ubuntu. It is a very old idea, coming from the wise people of Africa, which says that we are truly happy only when others are happy too. Pan-Africanism is a bit like a big school that teaches all the children of Africa, and even the world, to remember this wisdom. It is a movement that says, we are all brothers and sisters, no matter where we come from, no matter the color of our skin. Grandfathers and grandmothers used to tell stories by the fireside to pass on these values. For example, they said, one finger cannot pick up a pebble. This means that alone we are weak, but together we are strong. Pan-Africanism invites us to look at the past, not to cry, but to learn. The documents in our library speak of journeys, tramps, people who walked a long time to find freedom. In Sir Tramp's sketches, a traveler tells how he walked alone along the Black Sea, visited monasteries, and met pilgrims. This journey is a bit like the quest of every African, to seek his identity, his place in the world. Pan-Africanism is also a response to difficult times in history, like slavery, which 12 Years a Slave talks about. This book tells the story of a free man who was kidnapped and sold as a slave. For 12 long years, he suffered, but he never forgot who he was. He kept hope, and he eventually regained his freedom. This story shows us that even in the darkest moments, African wisdom helps us to stand tall. Values like respect for elders, solidarity, honesty are treasures that our ancestors left us. Pan-Africanism is like a big blanket that warms us all, reminding us that we are connected to each other. It is a philosophy of life that teaches us to share, to listen, to love. So today, we will discover these values together, through proverbs, tales, and teachings of the wise. We will learn how African wisdom can help us build a better world, a world where Ubuntu is the key word, the fundamental values of Pan-Africanism, Ubuntu, solidarity, and community. At the heart of Pan-Africanism is the idea that we are all connected. In Africa, it is often said, community is strength. This means that we are not islands, but parts of a great whole. When a child is born in a village, the whole village is happy. When someone has a problem, everyone helps. This is called solidarity. African sages teach that life is a gift, and that this gift must be shared. In the book Sir Tramp's Sketches, the author talks about his encounter with Russian pilgrims walking to Jerusalem.
A word, it is a way of life. It means that I cannot be happy if my neighbor is sad. It means that I must respect others, listen to them, help them. An African proverb says, where there is unity, there is strength. Another says, he who walks alone arrives quickly, but he who walks in a group arrives far. These proverbs teach us that cooperation is more important than competition. Pan-Africanism takes this idea to the level of the whole continent. It says, we, the peoples of Africa, are united by our history, our culture, our values. We must work together to build a better future. The documents in our library show that this unity has been tested. In 12 Years a Slave, slavery broke families, separated communities. But despite everything, the slaves kept hope. They created songs, dances, stories that connected them to their homeland. They protected their culture. This is an important lesson. Even when they try to divide us, we can remain united in our hearts. African values also teach us respect for elders. In Africa, grandparents are very important. They are the ones who pass on wisdom, traditions, proverbs. It is often said, a seated old man sees farther than a standing young man. This means that experience is precious. Pan-Africanism honors this wisdom. It invites us to listen to the stories of our elders, to learn from them, to respect them. Finally, there is the value of hospitality. In Africa, it is said, the stranger is a guest sent by God. This means that we must welcome others with kindness, even if we do not know them. This is a value that makes the world warmer. Pan-Africanism is also about opening our hearts to all Africans, wherever they are, and saying to them, you are my brother, you are my sister. The wisdom of proverbs and tales, how they teach values. Proverbs are short sentences that contain a lot of wisdom. In Africa, they are used to teach children, to solve problems, to give advice. For example, a proverb says, "The hand that gives is always above the one that receives." This teaches generosity. Another says, "One does not show the moon with a finger, otherwise one sees the finger, not the moon." This teaches humility, not to boast. Tales, on the other hand, are long stories that talk about animals, heroes, wise people. They are told in the evening, around the fire. They capture attention and convey life lessons. For example, there is the tale of Anansi the spider, a clever little character. Anansi is often greedy or vain, and he learns hard lessons. Children who listen to these stories understand that they should not be selfish, that they should share. In the African oral tradition, words have great power. ing
at first. Pan-Africanism uses these proverbs to remind people of their roots, their culture. It says, "Do not forget the wisdom of your ancestors." The documents in our library, like a tramp's sketches, show that travelers and pilgrims carried these stories within them. They told them to comfort themselves, to remember who they were. For example, the author of the book met Russian peasants who sang traditional songs while walking. These songs spoke of their land, their faith, their hope. In Africa, it is the same. Songs, dances, tales are treasures that connect generations. Another example, in African tradition, proverbs are often used to settle disputes. Instead of shouting, one says a proverb, and everyone understands the message. For instance, if two children are arguing over a toy, a wise person might say, "Two hands cannot hold two watermelons at the same time." This means that one must choose, or share. Proverbs are like keys that open the doors of understanding. Pan-Africanism invites us to learn these proverbs, to use them in our daily lives. They help us to be wiser, kinder, more united. Finally, African tales often talk about nature, trees, rivers, animals. They teach respect for the environment. A proverb says, "The earth is not an inheritance from our parents, it is a loan from our children." This means that we must take care of the planet for future generations. Pan-Africanism is also an ecological philosophy, which tells us that we are part of nature, and that we must protect it. The role of elders and orality in transmitting values. In Africa, elders are the guardians of wisdom. They are the ones who know the stories, proverbs, traditions. They are respected because they have lived long and learned much. A proverb says, "An old person is a living library." This means that their memory is precious. Pan-Africanism values this oral tradition. Before the arrival of books, everything was transmitted by word of mouth. Griots were storytellers, musicians, historians. They traveled from village to village, recounting the exploits of heroes, family genealogies, life lessons. They were very important. In A Tramp's Sketches, the author talks about pilgrims telling their stories around the fire. It is the same in Africa. In the evening, everyone gathers, and the elders speak. The children listen, learn, memorize. This oral tradition has preserved African culture despite slavery and colonization. The slaves taken to America kept their songs, dances, tales. They passed them on to their children, and so on. Today, these traditions still live. Pan-Africanism says, honor your elders, listen to their stories, learn from them. Values like respect, humility, patience are taught through these narratives.
Our tale tells of a tortoise that wins a race against a hare because it is persistent. This teaches patience and determination. Elders also use proverbs to correct children without scolding them. For example, if a child is lazy, one might say, "Laziness is the sister of poverty." This makes them think. Oral tradition is also a link between generations. It creates a sense of belonging. When you listen to your grandfather's stories, you feel connected to your roots, to your people. Pan-Africanism encourages this connection. It says, know yourself, know your history. The documents in our library show that travelers, like those in the book A Tramp's Sketches, often sought meaning in their lives. They went on pilgrimages to find peace, to get closer to God. In Africa, pilgrimages also exist. People go to the tombs of their ancestors, or to sacred places. These journeys strengthen their faith and identity. Pan-Africanism is a bit like a collective pilgrimage, a journey towards unity, dignity, freedom. Finally, orality creates community. When a story is told, everyone participates. They laugh, comment, ask questions. It is a moment of sharing. Pan-Africanism wants us to share our stories, our cultures, our values, to build a common future. SEP Pan-Africanism as a philosophy of life, applications in daily life. How can we apply African values in our everyday lives? First, by practicing Ubuntu. This means being kind to others, helping them, respecting them. For example, at school, you can share your pencils with a classmate who doesn't have any. You can say hello to everyone, even people you don't know. You can listen to others when they speak, without interrupting. These small gestures create an atmosphere of peace and friendship. An African proverb says, "Little by little, the bird builds its nest." This means that even small actions are important. Next, you can respect elders. This means listening to your parents, grandparents, teachers, asking them for advice, thanking them for what they teach you. You can also ask them questions about their youth, about the stories of your family. This helps you understand where you come from. Pan-Africanism teaches us that our identity is linked to our history. Another proverb says, "He who does not know his past cannot build his future." So it is important to know your roots. Next, you can practice solidarity. This means helping those in need. For example, if a neighbor is sick, you can bring them a meal. If a friend is sad, you can talk to them to comfort them. Solidarity also means participating in collective actions, cleaning a park, planting trees, organizing a neighborhood party. Pan-Africanism says, we are all responsible for each other. Finally, you can value speech and listening.
Caters. Pan-Africanism is also a philosophy of peace. It rejects violence and encourages dialogue. For example, if you have a conflict with someone, you can try to talk calmly to find a solution together. You can also ask for help from a mediator, like an elder. The documents in our library show that travelers, like those in her tramp sketches, often had to overcome difficulties through patience and perseverance. They walked a long time, sometimes alone, but they did not give up. This perseverance is an important African value. A proverb says, "He who wants to cross the river must first wet his feet." This means that you must accept efforts and sacrifices to achieve your goals. Pan-Africanism encourages us to be courageous, not to be afraid of challenges. Finally, you can celebrate diversity. Africa is a very rich continent, with hundreds of languages, cultures, traditions. Pan-Africanism does not want to erase these differences, but on the contrary, to value them. It says, unity in diversity. This means that we are united, but each can keep their particularities. It is like a big garden with flowers of all colors. Together, they are magnificent. So, in our daily lives, we can learn to appreciate the differences of others, to be curious, to exchange. This makes the world richer and more interesting. To go further in understanding philosophical Pan-Africanism, we can explore the concept of negritude. This word was invented by African and Caribbean writers and poets, like Aimé Césaire, Léopold Sédar Senghor, and Léon Gontran de Moss, in the 1930s. Negritude is the pride of being black, the celebration of African culture, the rejection of racism and colonial domination. It is a movement that says, we have our own history, our own culture, our own way of thinking. We must not copy others, but be ourselves. This movement is closely linked to Pan-Africanism. It has inspired generations of young Africans to be proud of their roots. Another important concept is that of Usankafa. This word comes from Ghana, from the Akan language. It is represented by a bird that turns its head backward while moving forward. Sankafa means, it is not forbidden to go back and fetch what you have forgotten. This teaches us that to move forward, you sometimes need to look back, learn from the past, and take what is good. Pan-Africanism uses this concept to say, do not forget your ancestors, your history, your traditions. They are a strength to build the future. The documents in our library, like 12 Years a Slave, show that the past can be painful, but it should not be ignored. On the contrary, it must be understood to avoid repeating mistakes. The story of Solomon Northup, the slave who regained his freedom, is an example of resilience. He kept.
Africanism also invites us to reflect on deep questions. What is freedom? What is justice? What is dignity? African sages have answers to these questions. For example, they say that freedom is not just the absence of chains, but the ability to live according to one's own values, to be respected, to participate in community life. Justice is when everyone is treated fairly, when everyone's rights are protected. Dignity is self-respect, pride in who you are. Pan-Africanism says that all human beings have the right to dignity, regardless of skin color, origin, religion. It is a universal message. Another aspect of deepening is the study of values through the arts. African music, for example, is full of wisdom. Traditional songs often talk about life, love, nature, spirituality. Drums, dances, masks are means of expression that convey deep messages. Pan-Africanism values these arts as cultural treasures. It encourages artists to draw inspiration from their traditions to create modern works. Finally, there is the question of spirituality. In Africa, religion is not separate from daily life. Ancestors are venerated, nature is sacred, the invisible world is present. Values like respect for life, hospitality, generosity are often linked to spiritual beliefs. Pan-Africanism recognizes the spiritual dimension. It says that African wisdom includes a deep relationship with the cosmos, with the forces of nature, with the ancestors. It is a holistic vision of the world, where everything is connected. To understand and remember the values of Pan-Africanism, here are some tips. First, learn one African proverb each week. Write it in a notebook, draw a picture that illustrates it, and try to apply it in your life. For example, the proverb "unity is strength" can help you work in a team. Next, listen to the stories of your grandparents or elderly people. Ask them to tell you tales from their childhood. Note what you learn. You can also create a small show with your friends, act out an African tale, or sing a traditional song. This will help you memorize the lessons. Another tip: when you see someone in need, ask yourself, what would Ubuntu do? The answer will often be, help them. Finally, read or listen to stories about African heroes, like Sundiata Keita, the founder of the Mali Empire, or Nelson Mandela, who fought against apartheid. Their lives are examples of courage, perseverance, forgiveness. Their actions are guided by African values. By learning about them, you will understand Pan-Africanism better. Remember, wisdom is not only in books, it is in people's hearts, in daily gestures. Be curious, ask questions, and share what you learn with others.
Traditional African music, like griot songs, or modern artists who draw inspiration from their roots, like Salif Keita or Youssou N'Dour. Watch African animated films, like Kirikou and the Sorceress, which tells the story of a small, wise, and courageous hero. This film shows many African values: solidarity, respect for elders, intelligence. You can also visit a museum of African art, or participate in dance or percussion workshops. Finally, talk with people from Africa, listen to their stories, their experiences. Each person is a source of wisdom. Here are some questions to reflect on. What does Ubuntu mean to you? How can you be more supportive of others? What stories would you like to pass on to your children? Pan-Africanism is a journey, a quest for meaning. Every step counts. So keep learning, sharing, growing. And remember, I am because we are.